Hey guys, it's Cassian. Okay, so here's the plan for this video. This game is super hard to talk about without going into spoilers, so for the first half of this review, I'm just going to stay away from them completely. Then I'll make sure to make it super clear before I jump into spoilers for this game and the first game. Alright, here we go.
We got this.
Got a bitch of water! Here! Go on, girl, get her! Don't let her get away!
One of the biggest complaints that I had about The Last of Us was that the combat and gameplay could have been a heck of a lot better. Well, in this game, they're a heck of a lot better. The basic idea of combat in this game is essentially the same as the first game. You can either sneak around and silently kill people or attack head-on, or a bit of both, which is what I did most of the time. However, this formula is improved upon in a lot of ways, the most important of which is that the AI is way smarter. I found myself getting flanked and outsmarted by enemies a lot, which is good because it kept things more interesting. Speaking of enemies, we have a few new inclusions, like this new super scary type of zombie that farts in a big cloud to kill you. Okay, it was scary when I was playing. They also make you fight these new dog enemies in this game, and the first time I saw one I was like, okay, I'm not killing this guy, he's just a poor little dog, he's not a bad dude. Oh my god, he just tore my throat out, what the heck, oh my god. So yeah, after that I didn't feel quite as bad about killing poor Fido. And I haven't quite looked at my dog the same way either. So you have a few new abilities that you can use during combat in this game, like being able to break glass to get into another room, going prone to hide in tall grass, or sliding through cracks in a wall. There's also a jump button now, which they made a big deal about in the marketing, but which doesn't actually affect the game very much.
Yeah! Parkour! Parkour!
None of the new features in this game are especially groundbreaking or revolutionary, but that's fine. They all work together to improve the basic formula from the first game, which is all that's really needed. The exploration and scavenging for materials is something that I feel has a much bigger emphasis put on it in this game than the first game. I spent a ton of time opening drawers and searching through abandoned buildings to find some scissors or parts to upgrade my gun. It's not really all that optional either. You run out of materials and ammo like crazy, so you have to constantly be looking for more. I ended up overturning every single room I went in like I was looking for a copy of Shrek 5 or something. Luckily, scavenging and looking for parts never got too boring for me because it felt essential to staying alive. Puzzle-wise, I'm extremely happy to report that the ladders, planks of wood, and dumpsters, all things that I didn't really like about the first game, are all but gone from part 2. I think I only had to move like 2 dumpsters in the whole game, which made me very happy. Instead, there's a few new types of puzzles. Sometimes you have to swing on ropes or power on generators, but they aren't nearly as prevalent as ladders and pallets were in the first game, and you have to solve them in different ways, which keeps things interesting. There are a ton of these new safes to unlock, but they're alright because you get a ton of helpful supplies inside. Plus, technically you can crack them just by listening to the clicks, which is pretty cool, if not super useful since the code is always like 2 feet away. So to summarize, the gameplay, combat, and stealth are all big improvements on the first game, and scavenging for materials is alright, just kinda tedious.
You okay?
Never better.
Okay. I think we're in the clear. Here, come on.
Oh, thanks.
This way.
Okay, so spoiler-free stuff first. Once again, the story is the main draw of this game. However, unlike the first one, I'm extremely conflicted about how I felt about it. Yeah, it was good, but it went in a bunch of directions that were very unusual and very risky, and that I wouldn't have necessarily picked had I been in charge of doing so. But maybe it's a good thing that I wasn't, because I can't deny that the final result is super unique and super interesting. So, some last thoughts before spoilers. The story is still really good, if not unusual, in its structure and pacing. It's pretty bleak and it has a lot of flaws, but it's also extremely well crafted and definitely worth playing. If you want to see my final thoughts on the game, skip to this time right here. Okay, spoilers for both The Last of Us 1 and The Last of Us 2 start now, so strap yourselves in. Okay, so right out of the gate, the game reminded me of why I love the first game so much, the bond between Joel and Ellie. Because at the end of the day, despite the good gameplay and excellent story, the characters and their relationships are the #1 reason the first game succeeded. Immediately after this though, the story takes its first sharp turn when Abby hits a Joel in 1.
That's a lot of damage. How about a little more? No, that's a lot of damage. Let's see if it's going to leak. Yep, it leaks.
And jokes aside, this moment hits hard. The sole purpose of the scene is to make you really, really mad at Abby, so that for the rest of the game, you're really driven to get revenge. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll stop. If this scene were less intense and awful to watch, then Ellie's grief and endless desire for revenge for the rest of the game wouldn't make any sense. But because it's presented in the way it is, we're able to empathize with her. This scene may make you feel really bad, but that's what it sets out to do, and it's undeniably successful at it. For the next bit of the game, the story is basically just Ellie fighting her way through Seattle, slowly taking out Abby's bros one by one. I have to be honest, this part of the game kinda started to lose me a little. The game still felt interesting, but it was all mostly because of the gameplay, not the actual story. So anyway, after a while, we get to what seems like a final confrontation between Ellie and Abby, right before we take the biggest hard turn in the game and flash backwards to Abby's perspective. Immediately after the switcheroo happens, and for a good while after, I was like,
whoa, what?
I still hated Abby because of what she did at the beginning. I mean, killing off a beloved character isn't exactly easy to forgive. Slowly though, over the next 10 hours, the developers did the impossible. Step 1. Create a brand new character and set that character up as a villain of the story by having her kill a beloved character from the first game. Step 2. In a surprising turn of events, make the player take control of the villain, the character they've hated for the entire game. Step 3, and this is the impossible one, make the player like the new character. Yes, that's right, make the player like the character they used to hate by making that character both sentimental and redeemable, so that by the end of the game, the player is rooting for this new character. Mission accomplished. And this right here is why the game works. If they hadn't succeeded in making you care about Abby just as much as you do Ellie, then the game wouldn't have succeeded as a whole. Because the story is built on making you care equally about these two characters, so that you're forced to reflect on the ideas of right and wrong and the morality of revenge. I know this part didn't succeed for a lot of people, but for me, it really did. The final confrontation between Ellie and Abby was really powerful, because I really liked both characters. I didn't know who to root for, and I think that's a really interesting direction for a game to take. Alright, so now I'm going to run through a bunch of things that I liked about the game, but I don't know where to talk about anywhere else. I'm calling this segment Double Thumbs Up. The graphics and level of detail are insane. We're talking Grand Theft Horse level stuff here. The scenery, the way people move, the tiny details are all insanely cool. If I had to mention one thing, it would be that I could see Ellie's fingerprints at the workstation, which just completely blew my mind. Good job! The score, my man Gustavo Santaolalla does it again, and the score for this game is just awesome. Well done. The actors all do an incredible job. Like the first game, this game has a lot of the best acting I've seen in any video game or even any movie or TV show. Very nice. The accessibility options are great. Even though personally I didn't really use any of them, it's awesome that this game has all kinds of settings that you can tweak so that basically anybody can play the game, even if you're like blind or something, which is just so cool. Extremely sick. Okay, that's it. Now let's talk about things I didn't like about the game, the side characters. The main characters in this game, Ellie and Abby, are given plenty of time to develop, and they both feel like fully fleshed out people. However, it seems like almost all of the side characters weren't given the same attention. In the first game, each character felt important, meaningful, and fully developed, even if they only showed up for a few sections. However, in this game, almost all of the side characters feel rushed and underdeveloped. A lot of them feel downright pointless. Jesse and Manny were two characters that I was interested in learning more about and getting to know. However, before I could even get invested in them,
That guy's dead.
they left me feeling like I missed something. Was I supposed to care about them? I mean, how could I? I only saw him for like 2 scenes. It would be like if Han Solo got fried by Greedo 1 scene after we met him. You wouldn't feel too bad about it because you barely know the guy. Another example of a character that didn't work for me was Dina. At the beginning, I was hoping I would get a chance to know her, and I kinda did while she's running around with Ellie at the beginning of the game. But right as I was starting to like her and get to know her, boom, she's pregnant, and basically just sits in the theater for the rest of the game. I'm sure I would have liked her more had she been given time to develop, but as it is, I just kinda didn't really care about her that much. More than anything, these kinds of characters feel like missed opportunities. They could have been great, but they weren't. There are a few characters that do land though, mainly Lev. Lev kind of fills the same gap that Ellie did in the first game, in that he's a kid that follows you around while you slowly bond with him, changing your character for the better. Unlike a lot of the other characters, I felt like I got to know him well enough to actually care about him. Unfortunately, Lev was basically the only side character that worked for me, which was pretty disappointing. Beyond the characters, the pacing of the game felt a little off. For example, things keep jumping around with flashbacks upon flashbacks and a perspective shift that also goes back in time. It felt a little convoluted. Also, towards the end of the game, I kept thinking the game was going to end, and then it just kept going for a whole new section, which was a bit disorienting. Honestly though, most of the time I just went,
Alrighty then.
and kept playing, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. Ultimately, I think it's telling that all my favorite moments and characters were callbacks to the first game, like the museum and the relationship between Abby and Lev, which mirrors Joel and Ellie from the first game. Okay, let's talk about the ending for a second. Once we get to this point, both characters are broken, and in her quest for vengeance, Ellie has lost everything. Her friends, her family, and even herself, symbolized by her inability to play the guitar. She has brought upon herself the one thing she feared most, being alone. It's completely devastating. And that's why this game is so good. It's not worried about making you happy, it's not worried about how much you enjoyed it. The developers set out with a clear goal in mind, and they didn't stray from it in order to appease the masses. No, this game isn't that happy. No, it doesn't make you feel good, it makes you feel pretty terrible. A lot. But if there's one thing I want you to take away from this review, it's this. That's the point. Art isn't there to make us feel good all the time. And the best kinds of art make us experience complex and even negative emotions, wrestle with them, try to understand them, and be better people because of it. Like it or not, The Last of Us Part 2 is undeniably a work of art. The Last of Us Part 2 is an intense experience throughout. The gameplay is a major improvement on its predecessor, and it kept me entertained the whole time. But the story is where the game really shines. It takes massive risks, and though not all of them pay off, the ones that do, really do. This is an extremely unique and emotionally devastating experience that is seriously unlike anything I've seen in any game or even any movie. It's by no means a happy game, but it's undoubtedly a phenomenal one, and it's one that you should definitely experience. I give The Last of Us Part 2 a real review score of 9 out of 10. This game is really awesome.